All right. Well, my name is Brittany Faith, and I am the Fit to Practice Director for the ABA YLD. This is one of our core programming for our wellness initiative. And we are doing a kind of New Year's theme today about how to prioritize yourself, looking back on the year and planning more space for yourself in 2023. We hope you enjoy this program. We also hope that you'll look at our other suite of programming that the YLD is putting on. We try and do several series and webinars a month. And if you would like any more information, you can go to our YLD webpage or the ABA website for more information. And we look forward to seeing you. We have some additional programming in January and February that we look forward to coming to that as well. With no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Laura Kelley.
Hi, thank you so much, Brittany. My name is Laura Kelley, and I'm an immigration attorney in Miami, Florida. I'm also a professional certified coach, and I do my coaching through the business, The Joyful Attorney. Yes, it is possible. We are joined with two amazing speakers here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. We have Shahara Wright and Sarah-Nell Walsh. Ladies.
Well, I'll go ahead and go first since I'm off mute. I'm Sarah-Nell Walsh, and I'm a professional certified coach with Wayfinders, LLC. I practiced law for 15 years and left the practice as a partner at the national law firm of Baker Donaldson to found my coaching business. And I have found that I get to do all the things I loved as a lawyer, as a coach. I collaborate with brilliant people. I serve as a trusted advisor. I help solve hard problems. And one of the things that I love to do in coaching is really help people navigate that tricky intersection between life and work, which is what we're talking about here today.
And my name is Shahara Wright. I am a business law attorney. I'm licensed here in the great state of Texas, and I've been licensed for 23 years, 24. Oh my goodness, I almost lost a year. 24 years, and for 23 of those 24 years, I've owned and operated the Wright firm PLLC. Here doing business law and nonprofit law. Mostly I was doing litigation. I freed myself from that and went straight to transactional work. So for the last 5 years, I've only been doing transactional work. I'm a single mom, and so I navigate, life obviously as a single mom of 2 boys, also running a full-time law practice, and then just trying to live and be myself as well. So that's me and my background.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I just want to let the participants know that we will have a period of conversation regarding the topic, looking back on this year and planning more space for yourself. And we're also going to ask that you can put whatever questions you want in the chat or in the Q&A. There's always, I think in the Q&A, you'll have the option to post a question anonymously if you so choose. And while we're speaking, I'm going to be moderating those comments so that I can interject here and there for the awesome conversation that I know we're going to have. So just starting right from the top, what is self-care and how does this play into prioritizing yourself?
Well, I'll start. To me, self-care is really just doing something that gives you calm, makes you happy, something that, means something to you personally, and it doesn't really matter what that thing is. So it could be something as simple as watching Netflix all day and binge watching that, or, going to get a massage or pedicure, manicure, whatever it is, it's something just taking care of you and just you to give you some peace of mind.
And I'm going to broaden it beyond that, because I think that when we think about self-care, we do think about those manis and pedis and massages and kind of self-indulgence, right? But it's more than that. It is setting boundaries around our time. It is engaging in joyful activities that fill our cup. It's spending time with friends. It's making sure we spend time with family. It's doing all of those things that maintain you so that you can go out and serve your clients, which is so important.
Yeah, I love that. And I from both of you, one of the things that I've heard is self-maintenance also, in addition to self-care, because I think sometimes self-care can kind of sound, maybe a little woo-woo, and self-maintenance can be a little bit more like, oh, I can do that. But what would you say to, a young lawyer?
I'm going to say a point on that, which is I think that when people hear self-care, they think indulgence. And really, it should be something you engage in every single day. It's putting yourself on your priority list, right? And it's not something that you should, like, once a month, I engage in self-care, right? It should be something that you are making a habit every day.
And in line with that, what would you say to somebody, perhaps a young lawyer that might be listening to this webinar, saying, I don't have time to engage in self-care or self-maintenance every single day?
Shahara is a single mom. That's your softball.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it every day, right? I mean, there's lots of things on my self-care to-do list that gets shoved into a corner on a daily basis. But I try to make sure that I do something for myself. And so this year, I tell everybody that I'm an introverted introvert, right? And so that I really had to make a point of, like, even leaving my house and going to see friends. So I calendar that. And I did that like once a month. I do believe in the mani-pedi, so I make sure that I do that, at least, once a month. And so if I have once a month having something to do, then every week it's something to do. So I don't do it all on the same day. Maybe the fourth, Friday of the month, I'm going to go see a friend, whoever that is, we end up scheduling it. One day a month, I'm doing a mani-pedi, another day of the month, I'm just going to rest and I'm not, I'm going to take a half day off, something like that. So then every week I'm doing something. There's lots of things that I still have, on my to-do list, like walking and doing yoga and meditations, and those kind of happen haphazardly, but I don't get mad at myself if I don't do it. And so I think that's really the important thing, is not to punish yourself if you don't do all the things on your self-care list, because then it's not self-care anymore. You're just kind of punishing yourself. So that's kind of how I try to prioritize, is just say, okay, I'm just going to do this thing, and I don't really put a time limit on it or define it, but I give it enough room to say, okay, I'm going to meet a friend at least, once a month, put it on my calendar, friend day, so that I can make sure that I in fact do that.
Yeah, and what I love about what you're saying is that you put yourself on the to-do list, right?
Yes.
Like, you make yourself a priority by saying, these are the things I'm going to do for myself. And I think that I take a little bit of a broader approach. So some of the things I do every day that I consider self-care is, like, I drink beet juice because I know it's good for my body and it stimulates my organs and all those things, right? I might take a bath. I try to take a walk. I shut down my email at 6 o'clock every night. These are all ways, for me, small ways, that I make self-care a priority and that I bring it into my daily life. So I try to focus on what I can do every day, right? What is possible today? Maybe I don't have time for an hour walk, but maybe I have time to do the New York Times 7-minute workout, right? Maybe I don't have time to see a friend, but maybe I have time to text a friend. And so I really try to focus on what can I do for myself today that's just for me. It's not a should, it's not a have to, right? But it's something that I want to do that fills my cup and that gives me energy. And what I would say to the people who say they don't have time for it is that this is what keeps you running. So if you think about yourself, and I use this analogy in our pre-meeting, but if you think about yourself like a car, if you never give yourself gas, if you never change the oil, if you never go for your maintenance, right? Your car is going to leave you stranded on the side of the road. And the same thing is true of your body. So you have to invest in yourself, in your mental, physical, emotional health, the same way that you invest in the success of your business, the success of your firm, the success of your family, the well-maintenance of your vehicle, right? You have to give yourself that same level of attention.
Right. You can't run yourself into the ground and expect to have a sustainable practice over time. And so and it's also, Shahara, I love what you said, that it's not about, punishing yourself, because I think sometimes we do self-flagellate of all the things that we don't get done. And I don't think we need to add another, like you said, having another to do on your list that you're not doing. And so, yeah, let's punish ourselves for that some more. I think it's important for us to, and we're going to talk about a little bit more of the whys later, but to do it from this intentionality, this desire for wellness, and not just like, this is something I have to do, and if I don't get it done, I'm not taking care of myself and I'm a bad person. All the ways we catastrophize everything. And
one more strategy would be to pay yourself first. So if there is an element of self-care that you want to do, how do you put it number one in the morning, right? How do you do it first? How do you have breakfast with that friend if you want to see them, so that you don't have an emergency come up in the day? Or how do you exercise first? Or, right, doing that thing, paying yourself first, so that you don't fall to the bottom of your to-do list, which we are so apt to do.
Love that. And I heard Shahara, you saying that you put it on the calendar, that you put certain things on the calendar. I'm a huge proponent of calendaring. So I wanted to know what other tips y'all might have for making self-care that priority in a way that is doable for us, whether it's calendaring or some other strategies you may have.
So for me, like, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So I try to, put stuff on the calendar as much as I can. I don't always do it, but I try to do it, as much as possible. And then I just think about, like, when do I have just a little moment, and what do I want to do with that little moment? So I'll just take this past week, as an example. I was so busy from Monday through Friday. It was not even funny. Like, I onboarded a new legal assistant. I was doing this class, and I was out of the office for 2 whole days doing that. Also had stuff coming off of Thanksgiving, all these documents and stuff like I had to do. So I felt like I had, to get like 2 weeks worth of work done in 2 days. And by the time Saturday hit, I was like literally exhausted. And I had other work to do. And I just said to myself, you know what, I'm not doing anything. And I laid in bed. I watched, a show on Netflix, and I stayed in bed for like 2 days, and I did nothing. I ordered food for my son, and I was like, this is it. And I didn't feel bad. I didn't wash anything. I didn't wash clothes. I didn't wash the dishes. I didn't do anything. Like, I was just a complete bum. But I feel so much better this morning when I woke up, because I took 2 days to do nothing. And that was just a weekend, right? And so, and I didn't plan that. That wasn't my intention. I really did have other stuff that I had intentions to do, but I was just so tired that I knew that if I didn't lay down, just relax, just give my brain a whole break, that I wasn't going to be functional this week. And so for me, I just try to read my body, read my mind, read my emotions. If I'm feeling, overly stressed, and I'm feeling like, I want to like kill everybody in the household, and those kinds of things, right? Then I'm like, okay, you need to take a break. So you need to go find somewhere else to go and just, chill out for a minute. And I try to take that, on. So I always kind of check my emotions, check my feelings, because if I'm feeling overly anxious and overly stressed and I'm mad at everybody, then it's not so much about them, but it's more about me. And so then I'm telling myself, that's me saying you need a break. And so I take it, when I can.
Yeah, I love one of the tips you gave that you didn't call out specifically is that you outsourced, right? You bought some time by outsourcing dinner for your family. And there are so many things that we can outsource if we let ourselves accept help and ask for help. And so when I'm feeling overly stressed, I stop doing the laundry. There's a service that will come pick up laundry at my door and do it and drop it back off. I don't do that every week, but when things get unmanageable, like they did for you, I'll be like, this is a laundry-free week for me. I've got 3 kids, so I send it out. And I think that finding things that you are comfortable outsourcing and that you have the financial means to outsource when you need to is so important. You can outsource cooking, you can outsource cleaning, you can outsource laundry. I have a personal assistant who comes to the house 1 day a week. It's a lot cheaper than having an administrative assistant. And for me, that's what I need help with. I can handle the business side, but then I need help on my house management side to help that out. And then another one is like asking for help from friends, right? So, asking someone to pick your kids up for you if you've had a busy day and you can't get out to do it in the evening. I think that especially as women, we are taught that we have to do it all and that we can't ask for help. And there are tons of people out there that would be happy to help in your immediate community and at work. And so asking for the help that you need so you can carve out some space for yourself so that you don't run yourself into the ground is so important.
Excellent. And in line with that, with asking for help and what about, having these support systems? Like, how do you create support systems in your life that can help you outsource and delegate some of these things? Because you're absolutely right, Sarah-Nell, it can be really hard to ask for help. So how do we do that? I think some people will be like, how do I even take that step to ask? Do we have strategies for that?
Yeah, I think really it kind of starts with building your network, and it doesn't happen overnight, well, let me just back up. Building your network, but just understanding that your network may change over time, right? That network that worked for this one thing may not work for the next thing. So being okay with that, first of all. Obviously you have to just be able to admit that you need help, right? That's like the first step, right? Is admitting that you need help and that you can't do it all and you're not, this, super person that, that can handle every single thing that's thrown at you. So I think that is one important, something that, Sarah-Nell mentioned is about setting boundaries, and being able to say what you can and can't do and being comfortable with saying no or not now. I think is really important for that. And then having people around you that will help support you saying no and not now. Because sometimes you'll tell somebody, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that and do this. And then you'll have a friend or a colleague and be like, how are you possibly going to do all of that? How are you going to actually get all of this stuff done? And they can at least talk you off out of all the things that in your head you think you can do. That to me has been like a really important thing that I've realized, like, I will say yes to things because I think I can do it and I think I have time to do it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm stressed and overwhelmed. And they're like, well, you're doing 45 things. That's why you're stressed and overwhelmed. So maybe you need to figure out what things to let go of. So when you have somebody else that's kind of looking from the outside in, I think that's really helpful to kind of help you figure out, like, what that help is that you need. I've had a friend that I was just talking to about some stuff that was going on with my son and made a really good suggestion that I hadn't thought of. And this person doesn't even have kids. And they were like, well, why don't you do this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about it. So, just kind of having a network, a group of people that you can communicate with about what's going on, because some of their solutions may be helpful. And you don't even realize that you needed that until they suggested it.
And so many of my clients are exactly what you just described, Shahara, which is what I call a time optimist. They think they can do 70 hours worth of things in like 8 hours. They're like, what do you mean I can't do all of this stuff today? And they're setting themselves up for kind of disappointment because they're never going to feel like they're good enough if they think they can do 20 hours worth of work in an 8-hour period. Right. And they're setting other people up for disappointment too sometimes when they say they can do 20 hours worth of work in an 8-hour period. And so I think that, being realistic about our expectations of what is possible is so important. And I think it's so hard in an occupation like practicing law where everyone wants everything instantly, and it needs to be perfect, right? And you have so many demands on your time from opposing counsel, from your clients, from the courts. It can really feel like the world is pressing in on you from all sides.
Absolutely. And I love this idea. And I know we're probably not very good at this as attorneys, but I heard this from a mechanical engineer and I've just like adopted it. It's under promise and over deliver. And also, I think that's why calendaring can be so effective and so important because it gives us a visual representation of what we can and cannot accomplish in a day. So, we're going to like put our time into increments. We know, what increments are available to us. And the calendar just doesn't lie in terms of what we have time for.
Yeah, when Shahara was talking about like the people that you need around you to be successful, I will work with my clients sometimes on creating a personal board of directors, right?
Okay.
So who are the various constituents that you need in your life in order to be successful? And starting with the people that you have, that you see every day in your office, right? Like if you have access to an assistant, what do you want their role to be? How can they help you? What is reasonable for you to ask them to do? If you have access to a paralegal, what is reasonable for you to ask the paralegal to do? Can you have a conversation with the paralegal about what their skill set is and how they would like to help you, what type of work they like to do, which then makes it easier for you to ask for help, right? Figuring out what is a reasonable workload for you in this environment. How much should you be working every week to meet expectations? If you think the answer is 30 and the answer is 50, right? That's a problem. But also if you think the answer is 60 and the answer is 40, that's also a problem because you're leaving 20 hours you could take for yourself and you're giving it to work. And so thinking about that and then expanding from there. So what professional resources do you need in order to make yourself successful? Do you need a sponsor? Do you need a mentor? Do you need a coach, right? What do you need in order to be successful? And then personally, who do you need in order to be successful? Do you need a personal trainer? Do you need a therapist? Do you need a housekeeper? Do you need an accountant, right? And building that ecosystem of support that people that you can call on when you need them is so important. And you have to do it slowly because you can't go out one day and be like, these are the 20 people that I need to be successful and I'm going to go find them all. But if you prioritize and you have your eye out, right, and you find those people when you need them, then when the time comes up again that you need them again, you have them in your ecosystem in order to call on them.
Yeah. And I had a question about, again, this goes into that building that ecosystem, maybe with friends and family or creating this network. I wanted to know what y'all thought about vulnerability and talking about these hard things. And we're expected, as you both mentioned at the beginning, to not ask for help. We are strong. We are, often parents and attorneys, or just have a lot of stuff on our plate. And so, yes, asking for help can be hard, but I think that part of it is right. We're not supposed to be vulnerable. And this applies for both men and women. I'm wondering what does the role of communicating with vulnerability aid to one, our mental health, self-care, and that creation of that network for us?
I think that's a very real thing. And it's not that you're going to have a lot of people that you can be vulnerable with, right? Like there's going to be places and spaces that you really just can't be vulnerable and just admit that you're struggling. And so I think, again, this is kind of something that you build over time, right? It doesn't come, all at once. That you may already have like a close knit group of personal friends that you have, but then building some business friends that you need, or other friends that you have that maybe are not in your immediate circle, that you can build over time and go and get help from and whatever. So for me, like, I'm in a business mastermind, and it's not a group of attorneys, right? I'm like the only attorney in the group, and there's other different business owners, but that's our place to come and talk about the issues that we're dealing with as business owners. I had an accountability group, which was a different kind of group, and just saying, okay, these are the things I want to get done, and these are the things I need to get done, and kind of holding me accountable to not, either if I'm not getting it done, and being realistic, right, about what I can and can't do, and being honest with myself. I have a business coach, and half of the things I've done with my business coach this year has really not been business. It's just really being me whining about everything that's going on in my life, right? And that's been helpful because at least I've had an outlet to do that. I have family and friends and things like that, but sometimes you need people that understand, what you're dealing with, because like I said, I'm a single mom, I'm a business owner, I'm an attorney. And you may have somebody that's a single mom, but they're not a business owner, so they don't understand that. I have my mom, she loves me, but she doesn't understand like all the aspects of some of that stuff. I have other attorney friends, but they don't run their own business. They may work for a firm and they may have a spouse. So, it's not that you have to find that exact person, but sometimes different people, you kind of hodgepodge that relationship so that you can kind of get what you need from whomever you need it from. And I think that's really kind of understanding that it doesn't have to be this one person knows and understands everything, but being able to say, this is another lawyer, at least a lawyer can understand my lawyer drama and what's going on. This is a single mom, this single mom can understand what's going on, and they don't have to understand every aspect of it. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to get, is that I didn't have to find the one person that knew everything that was happening in my life. It was like, there are different people for different reasons, seasons, and just being able to understand who is what for you, I think will make a big difference.
I think also vulnerability has become such a buzzword, and we need to recognize that not all spaces are safe spaces, y'all,
Right.
Especially not in the practice of law. And, I am a woman, and in that I'm an underrepresented group, but I know especially for my clients who are people of color, that is especially true. And so where can you be vulnerable, I think, is a good first question to ask. Because not everyone deserves that, and not every space is I won't say appropriate for that, but not every space is going to respect that or accept it the way that you want it to. And so finding those places where you can be, right, having that person at work where you really feel like you can show up as your whole self. I know that law firms and employers want to be places of belonging, but just because they have that desire doesn't mean that they are. And so they might tell you you can show up as your full self at work, and you might know in your bones that that is not true. And so I would say just honor and respect that feeling that you have about that, but finding people with whom you can show vulnerability. And what I always tell people is like, what would it look like to be 10% vulnerable, right? What would it look like to give people a little sneak peek, and see if they're worthy of it? And if so, like, you can kind of let out the line slowly so that you don't feel like your trust has been violated.
Yeah. And I was going to say that, Shahara, I just love what you said about having more than one person like meet your needs. I think this idea that we have to find like one person, and they're going to, like, whether it's in romantic relationships or a friend, they're going to meet all of our needs and they're going to live happily ever after. And that is just a recipe for disaster. And it puts so much pressure on ourselves and other people. So I think, so Sarah-Nell, what you were saying about the board of directors, I love this idea that both professionally and with our friend groups. And I know that I can say as an immigration attorney, we have a lot of spaces where we can, talk about that particular area of practice, which has its own challenges. I just want to say Samantha in the chat has said those do nothing days are so important, and she's the first lawyer in her family, and no one understands. So that would be an awesome opportunity for you to speak to other lawyers, maybe other first generation of lawyers like myself, right, and to talk to people who do understand, because we can't expect people who are not in our shoes, right, to understand where we're coming from. And I think that's what you are both saying.
I think the practice of law also is so all-consuming that if you don't have other lawyers in your network, the strategies that other people are going to give you just might not work for you, which can be really hard.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more about the why. Sarah-Nell, you had mentioned the idea of not, taking care of our cars, taking care of ourselves, but what is your why and what are some whys that maybe we can adopt for those of us who don't know why we should be prioritizing ourselves.
Well, my why is that I want to ski when I'm 70 years old. So my personal why for my health is that I want to be, I want my kids, I want to have a relationship with my kids and hopefully my grandkids, where they want me to ski with them when I'm 70. And then I want to take care of my body in a way that I'm alive at 70 and that I'm physically capable of skiing when I'm 70 years old. And so that is my why for prioritizing myself. But when I work with clients, we really think about health and longevity, right? And then sustainability of practice. Like, this is a marathon. Like, if you're going to practice law for 30 or 40 years, that is a long time to sustain the type of work habits that I see my clients have, right? And so thinking about that. And then also, as we've seen so much in the pandemic, resiliency, and resiliency is really your ability to bounce back. And so many people were bumping up along the bottom. They were just barely making it by before the pandemic. And the pandemic just threw them to the ground. And they had no ability to get back up. People were, the term was languishing, right? They were really in kind of a deep burnout. And that's because they didn't have any reserves. They didn't have any resiliency. And so those are really the three main whys that I see with my clients when they come to coaching that I can tap into in terms of how I can help them prioritize themselves. And for some people, it's all about their practice, right? Like, practicing law is their number one, and there's no judgment there. But if that's your number one thing and you want to practice law for 40 years and make $1 billion, you still have to take care of your instrument in order to be able to do that.
Yeah, for me, my why changes, right? Like, my why is not always the same. There's different, again, I just really believe that everything doesn't have to stay stagnant, right? And so things change in your life, and your whys change as well. So it's not going to always be. For me this year, my sister passed away. My younger sister passed away in December of last year. And so when I was right before she passed away, I was in the strategic planning class, and I, had all of these things that I was going to do and where I wanted my business to go and how much money I wanted to make and all of these big goals. And then she passed, and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do any of this and grieve at the same time. And so for me, my why this year is I needed to be functional. Like, I wasn't really anything more than that. I needed to be able to function because I, again, single mom. So I had to be able to show up for my kids. I'm a business owner. I have to be able to, take care of my employees and take care of the things I need to do. I need to take care of my clients and make sure I'm still able to draft and do all of these different things. And I still had to show up for people, and I needed to be able to do that. And so I had to do things for me so that I could still show up. And so for me, that was my why, this year. My why going into next year is still some of that, but also I just realized, like, the level of stress that I was dealing with, not just on my business, but personally. And I'm like, I'm feeling it. So I need to be able to find a way to relieve the stress, right? So my whys every year are multiple, and they also kind of shift for what's going on, because you really never know what's going to happen. And I think this year kind of taught me that okay, I have to adjust. I didn't have the capacity to do things that I used to be able to do, and I've had to be able to say I can't do this because I just don't have the emotional, physical capacity to do it. So now how do I shift, my practice? How do I shift my business? How do I shift things so that I can get done what I need to get done? So I just say, again, your whys are whatever they are, but just understanding that they may be different, from year to year. With something may change, may shift your whole perspective, and your why may change, and be okay with that. But whatever it is, that you do the thing that you need to do to help you be able to navigate this thing called life, because it's very difficult, especially if you're trying to do it by yourself and handle everything by yourself. I just don't think that this day and age, that's something that we should be, striving for. We definitely need to have a network or group of people that can help us navigate.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that the structure of the 40-hour work week or our legal career, which is more than 40 hours typically, especially if you're a business owner, it was set up for a kind of a different type of family dynamic than we have now. A very different family dynamic. And so again, that goes back to this thing about not punishing ourselves, not self-flagellating, because we need to ask for help. We all need to ask for help because we don't, most of us do not have the type of resources and again, that family dynamic that was what people had when they, when this structure of the work week was set up for us. So we're not failures, we're not bad, we're not wrong for needing help and needing to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I think it's so important though to know what your why is. And Shahara, you were so brave to share that, this year has really been for you about getting back on your feet after losing your sister. That's huge loss. But knowing that allows you to set a framework for what you can say yes and say no to this year. And I think a lot of people don't know what their why is. I think so many people are running on autopilot and they don't know why they should prioritize themselves. They don't even know what that would look like. And so if that is you, I encourage you to spend some quiet reflection time about how you're worthy of time and attention and what it would feel like to make yourself a priority, and how you can do that in some really small ways, because it's very easy to let work become the only thing we focus on, right? Our culture prizes that. So it's easy to do that and we get celebrated for it. And so that's a double reinforcement. And so taking a step back from that cultural expectation and saying, does this serve me? Right? And if it doesn't, what can I shift so that it serves me better?
I love that. And I love this idea of taking that quiet reflection time to discover what your why is. Do you have any questions or tips for people to ask themselves to help, kind of tease out what the why may be?
I mean, I think I don't know, but Sarah-Nell may have a different opinion, but I think people know, right? I think you know what your why is. Sometimes you just don't want to admit what that why is, right? Like, I think right? You don't need anybody to tell you why. You just need permission to do that why, right? So sometimes it's like, I want to spend more time, with my kids, and I really want to, spend more time, at home with my kids. And you may feel guilty about spending more time at home with your kids because you also want to be, a career person and you want to have this career and whatever else. And so you're struggling against that, right? And not owning that both of those things are important to you. And so your why is finding balance, even though it's not really a real balance, right? 50-50 balance, but finding a balance that works for you, that might be your why. And I think really it becomes this thing where you find guilt because you want to do something, right? It's usually not really about you. Like, you may be sick and you may not be healthy and you want to be healthy, but you feel like if I focus on that, then I'm taking that away from something else. And I think really it's not about knowing your why, because I think most people do. It's about giving yourself permission to do it, and to prioritize that, to say, it's okay for me to prioritize myself. It's okay for me to prioritize my health. It's okay for me to want to spend more time with my kids. It's okay for me to want, a career in whatever that is. It's okay for me to want these things and not feel guilty about it. I think that's more the issue with what I see, with my friends and colleagues, is that we don't give ourselves permission to say it's okay to focus on that. And you just need somebody to tell you it's okay. It's okay to take a half a day off of work if you need to take a half a day off. The world's not going to end just because, you took off you work at 3 o'clock as opposed to 5. It's okay. It's okay, to say, all right, I need to, spend a Saturday turning off my phone and not looking at emails and whatever else, and just spend that time with my kids because that's what I want to do. It's okay to do that. And sometimes you just need somebody to tell you that it's okay and there's nothing wrong with that. And that to me is what makes the bigger difference in anything, is that your why, but you just need to give yourself permission to explore that.
I think that you're hanging out with some super evolved people, because a lot of people I work with do not know their why. And I don't know if it's years in practice, because I'm working with people who are like more 15, 20, 25 years out. So maybe this is not a YLD problem. But I think that when you have been working and you have been prioritizing other people's priorities, even if that's your family, right? That's not necessarily your priority, but you got to get your kid to school on time. There are all these things you have to do. And then there are all these things you have to do at work. It can be very hard for people to get in touch with what they want to do, with what their wants and needs are as an individual. And so if you're out there and you're like, oh, Shahara, I don't know, that's okay too. But I think that you need to make a little space for that. And what I've found in working with lawyers is that it's very hard for them to dream, right? Lawyers is all about what is right. And we tell people what to do. We are the experts. We are always the experts. There's a statute, there's an interpretation, there's a case that's right on point. And if you're working in the non-black and white realm where there is not a right answer, I think it can feel very uncomfortable for some lawyers. And so asking yourself the big questions of, what do you want your legacy to be? What did you love doing as a child that is not part of your life right now? Who were you as a young person and what brought you joy? I find that often for my clients, connecting with their younger self, somewhere between the age of 10 and 25, before they were overscheduled to every minute of the day, had something they needed to do from like 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, they can see how they used to spend their free time, and they can start to draw some themes around what their why might be. And your why can and should evolve over the course of your life. You're not going to be in the same season forever, but getting in touch with just what it is right now. What type of person do you want to be? And what role do you want work to play in your life? And what other dimensions of yourself do you want to develop? I think is fun to think about.
Those are great. Yeah. And in case you do need permission, this is the ABA right here giving you permission. So it's coming from on high.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with both of you. It's two very good perspectives. Some people do know their why, and some people need some help with discovering what it is. And I think those questions are very, very poignant. Thank you. And then, I don't, again, no self-flagellation, no punishment, but, if we're not prioritizing ourselves, ultimately, what are the consequences?
I mean, obviously the consequences, one, I think it affects your mental health, right? Because you're stressed, you're sad, you become depressed, and you may not even know that you're depressed. You become angry and frustrated, and you end up other people getting affected by that, right? So, it affects your home life, it affects your work life, you become the crazy person in the office, all because, you're not taking some time for yourself to be able to do that. So that's the mental health. I think it also affects obviously your physical health, right? Where, you may start drinking or doing drugs, or you may have a heart attack, high blood pressure, me, I like to eat. So then, you're overeating, all those kinds of things affect that to kind of do that balance. So to me, your mental health, your physical health, and then of course your spiritual health, as well, ends up getting affected. So when you don't really kind of take a minute to explore yourself, and your whys and the reasons and whatever else, and do that kind of self-reflection for yourself, it affects all aspects of it, whether you see it or not. Whether you think, I think there's times in my life, even now, where I think I have everything together and I think I'm handling everything well. And then somebody will say something to me and I'm like, wait, I'm doing perfect. Like I was handling all of this stuff, and you realize that you weren't handling it as well as you thought it was. So you always have to kind of do a check and balance against yourself and seeing, how am I feeling? What am I dealing with? How am I managing this? And asking other people what they see as well can give you some perspective, because sometimes when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we don't see the same reflection as our friends see. And so it's important to kind of understand that. So I think the reasons why we do this is because it affects our lives. And so we want to understand better about how that is affecting us, so that we would make the decisions to do something different.
I think that there are a lot of people who wake up at 50 and say, how have I spent my time? Like, what was I doing? Right. And are in a very different place than they thought that they would be. And they've been so busy in the hustle that they didn't look up to the horizon to see what direction they were going in. And to see, even if that's what they really wanted, I think that a lot of people go to law school because they didn't know what they wanted to do next. And, the law is a prestigious field and it feels good to tell people that you're a lawyer. But a lot of people don't like the practice of law. The job satisfaction rates are very low for lawyers. And so finding a way that you can make the practice of law work for you and that you feel good about what you're doing every day is so important. We spend way too much of our lives working to be miserable doing it. And so taking that time to say, do I like this? If I don't like it, what don't I like about it? And what can I change? Like Shahara, it was so brave of you to stop doing litigation. Like, that's a whole revenue stream, right? That you said doesn't work for me and doesn't align with the way I want to work or with the way I want to serve clients. And when I look at that, I think, wow, that's so brave. And you know yourself really well. And I wish that more lawyers would follow your lead and really job craft in that way to find out a more sustainable way to practice than trying to serve everyone else and what they need all the time, right? And putting their needs first. And again, I think that we prioritize that client service. You hear it all the big law firms, right? Clients first, we say all the time in big law. And so it can feel selfish even to put yourself on an equal level with your clients, and very countercultural. So I think it's really important. And then, if you look at, I won't remember them all off the top of my head, but like the top five regrets of the dying, one of them is that I spent too much time at work. I didn't spend enough time with my family. And so really thinking about that while you're young enough to do something about it, as opposed to having this retrospective of wishing that things had been different, I think is really powerful for people in the YLD, because you get to make those choices and those decisions now that are going to set the trajectory for your career.
Absolutely. So we have about 12 minutes left. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A. But I have one question I know is another one of these buzzwords, but it's so important, and it's boundaries. So how do you create boundaries and expectations in a way that allows you to prioritize yourself or self-care?
So I am one of those weird people that start with the word no. That's my answer for everything.
Nice.
You and Sean Grimes.
Yeah,
everything. So I'm always saying no to everything. And I know I have friends that are the exact opposite, but I'm like, say no to everything. You got to convince me why this makes sense. But I one of the things I started with small things, because I do have boundary issues in terms of like family and things like that I, do too much and I'll say yes to, and even though I don't want to. So, just at work, one of a tool that a friend of mine, non-attorney, taught me, which I don't know why I didn't know this, is like putting my phone on do not disturb. So like my phone goes on do not disturb at like from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. My phone's on do not disturb. Only a few people can ring through. And so like I did that. I have to pick my son up. So my son is 14, but he can't drive yet. My youngest one is 14. So I have to go pick him up from school. So at 3:30. So at 3:30, I don't set any appointments, any schedule, anything after 3:30 on a weekday. Like little things like that help create boundaries for me. Because even if I got back at the office at 4:30, 30 minutes, I can't regroup quick enough, right, to be able to be on it and have a conversation and things like that. So I do like little things like that with setting boundaries. Some people have really hard boundaries about days that they work. I have a client that they only take calls on like 2 days a week, right? And that's the only time that they'll do calls because they need time to do some other stuff. I don't really work, it doesn't really work well for me, but I mean, I still have other boundaries. And so I think really just kind of finding what you can do. And sometimes I say baby steps, right? If the first thing you can do is just put your phone on do not disturb, then start with that. Once you get used to that, then, do something else, like whatever works for you. But baby steps, if you have a hard time with boundaries, I think start with something small so that you don't feel bad about, doing it. Or if you change something that it doesn't, again, you don't hurt yourself because you didn't do that. So I say just start with something small. One thing that you can do that will make a difference for you and whatever that is.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think two things about boundaries. One, I think that approaching them with flexibility, you are not going to be able to hold as a lawyer all your boundaries all the time.
No.
You just won't, right? Stuff's going to come up. The court's going to schedule over that sacred day that you, right? You can't do it. And so I always tell my clients 80% of the boundaries, 80% of the time. Like that's really the best you can hope for. You can't hope for 100%. And I think that going into it with that idea of like flexibility and is going to be helpful again with that self-compassion and not feeling like you failed, and also not just giving up because it's like, oh, this will never work, so I'm never going to do it because I can't ever make it work. And then the other thing is boundaries are going to be different depending on the different environment you work at. So if you're in a small firm, if you're a solo lawyer, you can only schedule consults on certain days of the week. If you're in a big New York City law firm, that is not going to work, right? And so knowing your environment and knowing the cultural norms of where you work and what can be done versus what can't be done. If you're in a New York City law firm, you might not be able to do not disturb from 6 to 6, but you can do it from 10 to 6, right? And so knowing what you can do, I think is very powerful, and not just being like, it won't work for me and therefore I'm not going to do anything. Again, another great first place to start is turning off your email notifications. That really fragments your time and getting those pop-ups, right, of the emails. People then stop what they're doing and go to the email, and it really reduces your productivity. So it's bad for your clients and it's bad for you. So that in my mind makes that a no-brainer of another good place to start. But there are a lot of different categories of boundaries. So Shahara was talking about space boundaries. So every day at 3:30, she creates space for her family and she doesn't schedule meetings after that. If you can't do that with your work environment, you might be able to do it from 3:30 to 4, right? So you can pick your child up, or you might be able to do it from 12 to 12:30 and say, that's my sacred time. I eat lunch, right? And I do not work. I do not take work calls or meetings from 12 to 12:30. Or you can say, I only schedule meetings between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., right? There are some space boundaries that you can draw. There are also emotional boundaries. So if you're in a high stress environment, you may have been spoken to in ways you don't care for. And so being able to say, please don't speak to me that way, right? I would prefer you didn't raise your voice. Those are boundaries that are reasonable, that you can draw. You don't have to be treated in ways that feel disrespectful or harmful to you and your emotional health. And physical boundaries. You know, when I worked in the law, I hated when people came behind my desk to like look at something over my shoulder on my computer. It felt very intrusive to me. And so being able to say like, I would prefer you not step behind my desk. I will turn my screen around so you can see what I'm working on, right? But having those physical boundaries, I would prefer you didn't hug me. Thank you very much, creepy guy at the holiday party. A handshake works just fine, right? But knowing what is reasonable, that is reasonable, right? You are allowed to have a physical bubble. Some people have much lower boundaries of personal space than other people. And so knowing that you can protect that bubble. If you don't want people getting close to you, you don't need to tell them why. So those are just some examples of what might be reasonable workplace boundaries.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, we have 5 minutes left. I wanted to see if there are any questions before we give some final thoughts. And I'm not going to wait for it. Why don't we, Shahara, you want to give us your final thought?
Yeah, I just think that you have to think about what's best for you. And I mean, be selfish about this. And I know sometimes, especially for women, this can be really hard. Sometimes for men, it can be hard as well, which is be selfish. And like in the best case scenario, if everything was perfect and you can do all the things that you wanted to do, what would that be? Right? What would be those things that you would really want to have? And then start with one thing and just build upon that. I mean, to me, it's like you really have to think about being selfish and not think about the kids, not think about the spouse, not think about the parents and all the things. And like, okay, if I had everything that I wanted to do and it was just for me that I would do this thing. I would do these things. And then pick one of those things and do that one thing. I think that really makes a difference is you got to start somewhere, right? If you keep dreaming about doing some self-care one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm going to do that, that day may never, ever come. So what can you do today to put that stuff in there? I think that really is, to me, makes all the difference.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And I would just say you're worth it. You know, you are worth your time. You are worth your energy. You are worth your attention. And you deserve to be right up there at the top of your list. And if you don't know that, that's what I want you to know coming out of today.
That's your permission, right?
Yeah, I see so many lawyers who just don't realize what spectacular, luminous beings they are.
Wonderful. Well, that's a beautiful place for us to end. Thank you all for your kind attention. You will get the video playback and ways of contacting us after the webinar. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your Monday and the rest of your 2022.
Yes.
Happy New Year.